So in this video, we're going to take a look here at how Rome came to acquire Judea and exercised its authority into the region after the kind of the fall or collapse of the Hasmonean kingdom. So a couple of things to note here. First of all, what was going on here is the brothers Hyrcanus II and Aristobulus II were vying for political control of the Hasmonean kingdom after their mother, Alexander Jannaeus, had passed away. So their father, Alexander Jannaeus, had been ruling. He died, and then his wife took over as queen. And so, as queen, she could have Hyrcanus act as the high priest. Aristobulus, the younger brother, was more kind of ambitious and desiring both the position of the high priest and to be really the kind of king or heir apparent. So a civil war had been breaking out as supporters of Hyrcanus and supporters of Aristobulus tried to win over support and gain, as it were, a prominence in the area. Eventually, both sides end up trying to appeal to Rome to support them, realizing that since Rome is the greater power in the region, if they had Rome on their side, the other brother could not likely be victorious. So while he's subduing Syria, the Roman general Pompey, primarily through his tribune Scaurus, supported Aristobulus. Of course, Aristobulus bribes, as well as Hyrcanus was trying to bribe this tribune in order to gain that support. But since the priests were primarily favoring Aristobulus, he decides to go and give Aristobulus the support. So that would seem to make it at first that Aristobulus is going to be basically the ruler. He's going to keep the kingdom intact with Rome's support. But the Idumean Antipater, so Antipater is this, comes from the Nabatean kingdom. He is a wealthy type of merchant. He has been supporting Hyrcanus in one sense because Hyrcanus is weaker politically, and Antipater saw this to his advantage and thought he could have Hyrcanus more like his puppet. And so Antipater wants Hyrcanus to be the person who is kind of the high priest and kind of the face of government, with Antipater really pulling the strings in the background. Now, one of the things to remember about Idumeans were that territory was taken over by the Hasmoneans. And when they took over areas, they oftentimes forced residents to, in a sense, become Jews. Now, they're not really Jews because that's not how they were born, but they forced circumcision on the men, or they would die, and they forced Jewish laws upon the people to observe. So anyway, Antipater, I guess you can call him somewhat of like a convert, but probably forcefully, is going to try and run things in Judea through Hyrcanus. So he directly appeals to Pompey. He's a wealthy merchant, and so he can have access to a general. And so he goes to Damascus, and while he's in Damascus, he accuses the brother, Aristobulus, of piracy, which is an interesting ploy because one of the things that Pompey had earlier done in his career is he had kind of led the Roman navy to get rid of pirates in the Mediterranean, and he was given the authority by the Senate to actually go within 50 miles of the coastline. So not only does he have the sea, but he has 50 miles within the coastline of the Mediterranean to try and subdue pirates. And here's Aristobulus claiming that, here is Antipater claiming Aristobulus is engaged in piracy. But also that Aristobulus was somehow or another befriending one of Rome's enemies, Mithridates the sixth, Pontus, who Rome had been fighting with for quite some time. So anyway, he's trying to smear Aristobulus and hope to kind of get Hyrcanus in. Well, the accusation is made before Pompey, so that's now going to require Aristobulus to come and defend himself in Damascus. So, but Aristobulus has a great deal of pride, and his pride leads him to leave the proceedings, in a sense, because Aristobulus sees himself as really the king. I mean, he's got the support, he has more military might than his brother, and Pompey is simply a general of the Romans. And so, since he sees himself as a king and Pompey as a general, he doesn't feel like he has to acquiesce to a general, that he should be brought, as it were, before the Senate, the Roman Senate itself, and then make his pitch or his appeal. So he's kind of seeing Pompey as a lower person, which Pompey obviously did not appreciate. So Pompey decides then to march onto Jerusalem in 63 BCE and demanded Aristobulus to turn over his fortified cities, including in particular a Hasmonean fortress. Now this fortress had been given, as it were, by his mother, and it was supported by Sadducees, and so. But Pompey wanted it, and he wanted Aristobulus to liberate the Greek cities from Jewish laws, because generally what they did, if they were in the Hasmonean kingdom, even though they may have been set up as Greek cities, under the Seleucids, they wanted them to adopt Jewish practices, not Greek practices. And so now the Romans are saying, nope, these Greek cities get to behave according to Greek laws and customs. You cannot force or compel them under Jewish laws. But Aristobulus' supporters certainly would not turn over the fortress. And so this left Aristobulus in a tricky position, in which he then has to think and vacillate what's going to be the best strategy. But it's that delay to Pompey's request that gets him in trouble. And Pompey decides then to besiege Jerusalem. He takes Aristobulus into custody and besieges the city because he sees them as vacillating, as not, immediately acquiescing, as it were, to Rome's decision. So once Pompey breached the temple's northern wall, he and a few other men entered into the Holy of Holies on a Sabbath day in June of 63 BCE. And basically this marks, as it were, okay, now this area, this territory is going to belong to Rome. We are now going to oversee this area. So Pompey decides then to restore Hyrcanus. So he listens to Antipater, and he makes Hyrcanus the high priest, but he's not going to let Hyrcanus rule as king. So this kind of dual role of high priest and king that has been a part of the Hasmonean kingdom for some time has now basically come to an end with Hyrcanus II. So the Romans give the area around Jerusalem the name Judea. So we talk about Judeans, and so this to describe them as describing this area of Judah. The term Israel doesn't mean a whole lot to the Romans, but thinking of this area as somehow belonging to a tribe of people, an ethnic group who saw themselves as Judites. And now they're going to be called Judeans. And of course, this word Judean is also where we get our word Jew from. And Judaios, the Greek word is going to be Judaios. And the larger region is going to become known as Palestinia. That's the way the Romans are going to describe it. Although the idea of this area having that kind of designation, it had existed prior to this time. But that's how they're going to start referring to it. And it becomes basically a satellite of the province of Syria. So some major changes for the designation of these areas. So Judea now no longer had control of the coastal plains, which were quite significant, or the international highways in which goods are being, transferred and which could be taxed. So they lose that, and now the currency, there had been Hasmonean coins, and now there's going to be Roman silver denarius is going to start being introduced in the new currency. So we're going to get a lot of major economic changes that are taking place, and Judea is going to kind of fall, as it were, in terms of its significance under the Hasmoneans. The other thing that's going to happen is we're going to get tax farmers that are introduced. Some of these tax farmers, if we want to call them tax collectors, are going to be Jewish. So people might think about Matthew the tax collector, Levi the tax collector. And so these people who collect these taxes for the Romans is going to end up laying a pretty heavy burden upon people. And so this is going to have a kind of cascading effect in the region. Many landowners, including priests who are landowners, priests have become wealthy, for quite some time. They're going to end up having to sell their land in order to pay for taxes. So this is going to weaken them economically, and so it's a bad situation for the priest and for many Jewish landowners. Now, what's going to come in, and this is kind of a activity of oftentimes is colonization, because these Jews are having to sell off their land. They need people who will buy it. Oftentimes, some of these buyers, now they could be very wealthy Jews who can pay whatever taxes are required of them, and now see an opportunity to acquire more land. Or they could be non-Jews who are kind of colonizing the areas. So either Greeks or Romans who are coming in and buying up this land. And one of the strategies they see that they can do is they can get the land if they need to get a loan in order to get the land, or to pay off the debt that the person who previously owned the land could not pay. They figured that what they could do is lease the land. So they buy the land and don't farm the land themselves. They don't know the agriculture themselves, but they see a economic, potential in this, and then end up leasing the land to what we would call tenant farmers. So people who will work that land. Now, many of these tenant farmers are going to have been the previous owners of the land, so they couldn't pay the taxes. They default on any loans that they may have acquired, and so then they have to sell off their land to somebody else, or somebody else acquires it from them so they can be freed of that debt. And now then they're going to turn around and be hired and have to work on their land, but now it's going to belong to someone else. And so that's sometimes as well a background that we will see in some of the parables that Jesus tells. Imagine these landowners and these tenants who may have one time thought the land really belongs to them, and these landowners are kind of foreigners coming in and acquiring all of this. All right, so that's kind of the beginnings of the Roman rule in Judea, and we'll have more to say particularly about Herod the Great in a future video.